and welcome to Invisible, Breaking Through the Stigma of Addiction. I'm your host, Dean Anderson, and this is a show where we talk about addiction and how it impacts our community. Today, we have a guest who wears a whole bunch of hats. He's an advocate, he's a public speaker, he's a coach, he's a friend, he has lived experience. I don't even know where to begin with this guy, but I'm super proud to have him on the show. Once again, I would like to welcome Paulie O'Byrne.
Thanks, Dean.
Hey, Paulie. It's lovely to see you here
Good
today.
to see you. Thanks for having me.
It's been so long. It's been a couple of years since you've been on the show.
Yeah.
And I know that there's been lots of changes and things that you've been doing in your life because I follow you on social media, and once in a while we bump into each other in the same circles.
Sure.
But I know you've been making a lot of changes in your life, one of them being your work with the London Knights. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I finally got off the front lines, the actual front lines of crisis work, and you know, it was just time for me I had my experience there, and it was time for me to get to a place where I could probably have some more sustainable change with people. And so I jumped at an opportunity with CMHA, and in September the public educator asked me to hop on board with the Knights and to help the Knights out with their mental health. Every team has a mental health coach with their Talk Today program, and I thought, this is perfect, like this is just my wheelhouse. And then, you know, tragedy struck at Christmas time, and we really had to do some work. And so I think, like, in that situation, we look for the helpers in crisis, right? And I was so grateful that I got to be a helper, and that I'm healthy enough in my life to be a helper, and that I was able to be there for these guys, and we've been able to work through it and to navigate that grief of losing a player mid-season. And you know, I think that these guys have really been really receptive to having a mental health coach.
Wonderful work.
Yeah.
The confusion I think some people have is they might think that, oh, you're a pseudo famous hockey player and everything's going great in your life and everything must be wonderful. Why, you know, can you shed some light on why the people in what seemingly have their life going in the direction they want to go would need or struggle with mental health concerns?
Well, I think at the end of the day, they're the kids that I'm working with are kids. You know, like no matter what jersey they wear, they're still 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, normal 18, 17, 16-year-old kids that deal with teenage pressure, you know, and I think that they deal with a lot more pressure, especially with the London Knights. You know, like there's almost 10,000 fans there every night, and you know, not every organization has 10,000 fans, and so you have to think, as being an 18-year-old, there's a lot of added pressure to perform, to always be on your game, to be mentally strong, and so my job with them is to have nothing to do with their performance. I don't care how many goals they score. I just want to help them navigate the pressures of being a teenager and the mental health kind of struggles that come along with that. And there is a lot of struggles with being a teenager, whether you're playing for the Knights or not. There's, you know, it's the pressure of being a teenager. I love that I get to be there for them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't think people recognize, you know, and maybe I'll ask you a little bit if I know that I know some of the numbers, but there's also some really crazy statistics out there when it comes to mental health and suicide. But I'd also like to note the last time I was at a Knights game, which wasn't so long ago, I was looking down and I saw these as grown adults. Like I was looking at these as men playing hockey on the ice, and my brain didn't really click until me and you had a conversation about this last month at Western. But it really is. They're children out there playing hockey, and we're treating them like they're adults. So I like that you bring that to light. But I don't think people realize how serious that is for the youth and some of the statistics that are involved.
Definitely. I mean, you got to think the oldest player is 20. Right, and that's it. And like, what was your brain's not developed till you're 25, so they're still going through some pretty major changes within themselves at that age, and people put them on a pedestal like adults, right? And I think society maybe just needs to say, like, they're still kids, and you know, like, we can't pressure them, and you know, a lot of these kids read the stuff that's online, and if they lose a game, they read all this, you know, trash about them, and can you imagine bullying a 17-year-old kid, you know, as an adult behind a computer screen? Like, how does that really make you feel? So it's about, like, do I treat them as an adult, or do I treat them as a not a child, but as a teenager who's really good at a specific sport, you know? And that's the part that I come in, is that, like, you know, like, we can go for breakfast, we can talk about fishing, we can talk about golf, and we don't have to talk about hockey, and it's just about life, and it's bringing them back to a place where they are a teenager and just playing it. They're really good at a sport, and that's the best.
That sounds like a pretty cool
Yeah.
job. And just go
Yeah.
for breakfast and talk with some people and let them just be in themselves.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's pretty important.
Yeah, I mean, I that's like one part of the, I guess since the last time I was here, that's just one part of the change that's happened in my life. You know, I've got into a lot more with COVID. I got on a lot more virtual kind of speaking events, and so that was a different shift for me to you know, not be able to gauge an audience face to face, and that's you know, through my public speaking. I've done that over a decade now, and man, it was tough. It was tough to navigate how to get into that virtual. You know, I like to crack jokes, and you crack
Nobody laughs
you
at your
crack
joke.
jokes and no one laughs is a real tough thing, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to keep going. So I think, like, no matter what, my recovery has been no days off. I just haven't been, you know, the second I take a day off is the day I'm drinking, because I'm a drinker. And I have to have that attitude that there's no days off. And so I work on my recovery every day, and it's, you know, provided some pretty cool opportunities for me. And I just got trained in the T4T for assist, so I can train other people in applied suicide intervention skills training, which is a really cool thing that I just got in my back pocket, and something I kind of want to take and run with kind of everywhere.
So I am going to put a pin in that, because I got lots of conversation around the S words, the suicide word.
Sure.
And I want to dive into it deeper with you probably after the break. But right now, I would like to know about your advocacy work and your public speaking. You know, what is the main focus of that? What are you hoping to obtain through the process of having these public speaking events and encouraging the community?
I think right now, you know, my message has maybe changed a little bit. That, you know, it still has a lot to do with hope, but you know, I don't know anyone that's been through a pandemic before other than this one. I think this is all our first pandemic, and so trying to navigate out of this pandemic has been really tough. We've told people to isolate for 3 years, right? And you and I both know that isolation is, you know, it's a key contributor to relapse or just raising risk factors. And so the thing now is that I'm trying to get out there. My message that I'm trying to get out there is just that we really just need to be kind humans to each other. And we need to really relax with each other. A lot of people have turned into scientist experts. They've turned into, you know, zoologists, you know, Carol Baskin. They've turned into, you know, these professional people. And at the end of the day, this is all our first pandemic. You know, like that's it. That's our first try. Have we screwed up? You betcha we've screwed up, but it's our first one. And we're not going to yell at a baby the first time that when it's trying to learn how to walk and it falls. We're not going to yell at that baby and say, like, no, that's because you did this, or that's because you got this. We're just going to support that person and say, you know what, it's okay, and we're going to try again. And I think that's how we have to take the approach of this pandemic, is to try to get people more out of that isolation and have some social skills. You know, I think we've lost a few social skills in the last few years, and I think that's the purpose of my advocacy work now, is to just, let's get back to being good humans. Ask people how they're doing. You know, tell people that you love them. You know, a weird question. Tell your best friend that you love them, or tell a stranger that you love them. You know, and it might make their day. That might be exactly what they need. So I think that's kind of the direction I'm going with my speaking now, which is, you know, it's really cool that I still get to do this. And again, no days off. That's what I'm kind of living by right now. Is there's no days off, and I hope that I can inspire other people to share their own story through that.
So I'm going to paraphrase what you're talking about with the no days off part, because there's an audience out there that thinks that they need days off and it's important to self-care. He's not referring to never working. He's not referring to to working every day. He's referring to the idea of working on self and recovery and reflection and self-care and taking care of the things you need to take care of underneath to make sure that you're a healthy person, to be able to provide supports for others, because without my cup being full, I can't pour into others. Is that a good summary there?
Yeah. Like, I have to, you know, what's really important to me now is self-care. Like, and it's something that I intentionally have to do every day. And that's part of my work, you know, like that's part of the work on Paulie, is that I have to practice self-care. I have to get out of myself for a little bit, because I get squirrely in the 6 inches between my ears sometimes. And so self-care is essential. It's not selfish. I really think it's essential. And I think that, you know, talking to a therapist or talking to a counselor is beneficial to me. because I work in the helping field and I'm an empath, and I try to not bring my work home with me, but unfortunately that sometimes comes home with me, and so I have to have an outlet, and I don't have like a negative kind of attachment to counseling, right? I think the most successful people in the world go to counseling, and I want to be a successful person, so I'm going to follow their lead, and I'm going to keep going to counseling for myself, and that's the work that I do. Like I still have to do. Sure, I go to work every day, and I get a paycheck, and that's great, but that's not my work. Like my work really is maintaining sobriety, getting ready for the next day, or getting ready for the time that is about to be there. And am I prepared? Am I healthy? Am I in a place where if something goes south, do I have the coping skills to get through that? I think that I've worked really hard to get to that point, and I think I've done that on the backs of, giants in front of me to get there.
Cool. There's a theme here, and I'm hearing that the public speaking is going towards helping people to understand compassion and compassion for others, but then the self-care is self-compassion and compassion for self, right? Because when we work in the helping field, such as I do, compassion fatigue is a real thing, and we can get to a point where it hurts us and it hurts others to continue to work in a field where we're not fueling ourselves and taking care of our self-compassion, right? You shared something with me when we were at Western. You showed me your business card, and you put the letters LE on your business card, and I freaking loved it because I'm a huge advocate of LE, and for the audience, it means lived experience, is what Paulie's put on there, and I'm just like I want to put LE on everything. I can get a tattoo that says LE on it. How does the lived experience part cross over into the work that you're doing? Can you share a little bit about that?
I think that I don't use anything that I learned in school. Not one thing that I learned in school do I use during the day. I use all my lived experience, and not just my lived experience, but my lived recovery. And I think that that's a really cool thing that, recovery for a lot of people isn't, I'm going to put a drink or a substance down and life is going to get better. Then we have to deal with life on life's terms, and we have to build some coping skills. And I think how that's transferred is that I just share about hope, and it's not necessarily about my story that I'm sharing about. I'm just sharing about the hope that I felt, or the hope that of that seed of hope that was planted in me, and how that grew. And I just want to be an example. I don't want to. It's not about my story. It's really about identification. It's not about comparing. And so I feel like, being in, a former hockey guy, that I kind of have a little bit of an in with the Knights, and that I get the hockey culture, and I've been on both sides of the hockey culture. I've been on a really ugly side of the hockey culture, and now I feel like I had to go through that ugly side so that I could get here. Because if I didn't go through that stuff, I wouldn't be able to bring these experiences to these guys. And it's not just the players, it's the ownership, it's the coaches, it's some of the fans, it's the ushers. Everyone deserves to get a little bit of help, and if I can help them, it's a great place. And I think the LE part on my business card is me just saying, like, I'm really sick of, and this is who I am, I stir the pot. I'm really sick of not getting jobs because they don't have letters after my name, or not being taken seriously because they don't have, master of social work or something. And so when people ask, what's LE mean? I'm so excited to tell them that it's lived experience, and they think like, oh, like that's odd. And I think, you have no idea how much I paid for this. I paid a lot of money for this, for these letters after my name. I'm going to use it. So I think I can add a little bit of fun to it, and some light to a pretty dark story that I have, and this is a way that I get a little bit of my power back, and that I would like to be taken seriously for my lived experience. I joke around a lot about it, but I'd like to be taken seriously, that I do bring some worth, and it seems to be working. Or at least it's having a conversation, right? I showed you, and you've been thinking about it. So, you want to get a tattoo? That's awesome.
It's a conversation piece without a doubt. And we can recognize in the community and some of the panels and boards and stuff I'm on, they really put a focus on saying we need to have the voice of the lived experience person in the space. And I think right across the board we see the value that provides. But maybe there is a piece that you're right, where there are jobs that aren't being offered to, and there are positions that where these lived experiences, of course, with ethics and understanding, but being able to fit into those roles could make some pretty serious change in the community. And I'm a proponent of it. And I sorry I laughed so hard. I bet you the producer's mad at me for laughing in the microphone so hard. But yeah, it costs a lot of money. And it costs a lot of time, and it costs a lot of relationships, and it cost us, some of us may even close to our own life in the process of trying to make that purchase of those letters that we want to put after our name. And I just love it, and I think it means so much, and so I appreciate that.
For sure, you can use it.
I'm gonna.
Good, use it for sure.
I'm gonna. Yeah. You said something in regards to comparing instead of identifying, not comparing but identifying instead of. And there's a quote that always pops into my head. Comparison is the thief of joy, right? And when we look at it from that perspective, and I think that what the audience, some might know or some might not understand, is a major part of how the secret society of Alcoholics Anonymous works is the idea of lived experience and being able to connect with a human being that kind of gets it, right?
Yeah, I think that it's really good to have clinicians when it comes to substance use and mental health. I think there's a big benefit to it, but I think that there's a big benefit to it because there's another side to that sword of lived experience, right? It's really tough for people who don't have lived experience, say, with addiction or substance use or mental health, to help someone else out with that, because they may not know what that person's feeling, and so they're putting their own perspective on what they think.
Sure.
And that's, I think, with the issue that I struggle with clinicians, is that they put their own, what they think, clinical approach on it, and sometimes people just need a hug. Sometimes people just need to be listened to. They don't want you to speak, and I think that that's the issue that we come into, is people respond to, they wait for you to be done, and then they talk. They don't really care what you've said. They just wait to be done, and a part of, intentional listening is actually just listening. That's really what it is, and you can help a lot of people by just keeping your mouth shut, and just listening, and look for those things that, those nuggets of gold hope. That's what I call them. Look for those, if someone's struggling, look for those nuggets of gold hope and expose them. That's what that's what I want to do to lighten the day. I love making people laugh, because it makes me feel like they're happy for a second of their day. And even if they're miserable in their lives, they laughed for one point in their day. And that's the purpose that I have in life. And it helps. I have a little daughter, and if I can make her laugh every day, we're gonna have a pretty good life. And I'm so grateful that I'm in a position to have that lived experience, that I can be a dad now. And she's gonna know about my past for sure. I will be open with her about that. But right now, it's just about making her laugh, right? It's just about being there for her and being present for her. And I think making people happy is kind of my goal right now, because it makes me happy.
Awesome.
At the end of the day, I like to be happy. I don't want to live in kind of the depression, and I struggle with depression. So I like to kind of switch it and challenge that diagnosis as much as I can.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we're going to put a pin in that for 1 second, and we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to have some more golden nuggets from Paulie O'Byrne after this. Welcome back to Invisible, where we're having a amazing conversation with Paulie O'Byrne. Thanks again, Paulie. I want to jump right into it. We got a limited amount of time, and this is a big topic that I want to segue that I had pinned earlier, and it's the S word, and it's this taboo topic that doesn't get talked about a lot. And you had brought it up earlier that about suicide, and I understand that you've recently completed your assist training to be a trainer of the trainers, which is an amazing feat in itself. I am also assist certified, and I recognize the value in that, and I want to talk about it. I want to talk about that taboo word, suicide. Hit me with it, buddy.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack with
absolutely, but we got a little bit of time, so whatever we want to unpack.
So I'm as morbid as it sounds, I love talking about suicide. I'm a big believer that it doesn't it doesn't create risk factors with other people that it's contagious. I think that that's a really, really strong stigma that we need to get rid of. When we talk about suicide, we let people know that it's a safe place to talk about suicide. Because we're hitting it straight on, and I'm not a person, you know me, I'm not a person to go around this subject. I'm a person to face it head on. So yeah, a few weeks ago I went to Kingston I went to the Train the Trainer training. That's tough, but
Yeah.
you know, Train the Trainer training. So I spent 5 days talking about suicide, you know, 10 hours a day submerged in talking about suicide and being able to not just talk about suicide, but be able to help other people talk about suicide. So I became a facilitator for the ASSIST program. So I can now train anyone across Canada in applied suicide intervention skills. And I think that's a big benefit that we can bring to not only the addiction and mental health world, but we can bring it to you know, hairdressers. We can bring it to real estate agents. We can. That's what I learned when I was there. That hairdressers are like just under counselors. You know, like you get your hair done, you talk to your hairdresser, and what do hairdressers have to provide? And so that's kind of a place that we can capitalize on with some suicide intervention. And I think that it's, you know, the stats are really bad. In 2020, 1.9 million Canadians attempted suicide.
Say that one more time.
In 2020, 1.9 million Canadians.
1.9 million Canadians attempted suicide.
And just over 4,600 completed suicide. So that's just over 12 a day in Canada. And I think that's way too much. I think that's 12 too much. I'm a big believer that we can eliminate suicide. I really think that we can have a goal of no suicides. And I think we need to have a society that's willing to talk about suicide. It's not a taboo subject, and it really is a life-saving subject that we can talk about. So, through this training, I've been able to get more comfortable with myself talking about suicide and kind of conquering my own stuff with my own, you know, lived experience with suicide, and I've been able to bring that, and I think that's been a big benefit. I went to this training with 25 other people. And I was the only person that was kind of outspoken that said, yeah, I've lived experience, you know, as a suicide attempt survivor. And I know in that group of 25 people that I wasn't the only one, but I was the only person willing to say something. And so if I can keep being that, you know, that pot stirrer, I will be that pot stirrer, because I think that maybe by the end of those 5 days, some people said, you know, like I just wasn't willing to talk about it at the start of the week. And you know, me too. Like I've been through that too. And I think, like, I didn't tell them to say that. I didn't say you have to, by the end of the week, talk about your own lived experience. I just lived my life out loud, like I do, and I share my experience with suicide. I'm grateful that it's been over a decade since I've had a suicide attempt. And the reason why that is because I've had people in my life who care about me. You know, they don't try to diagnose me. They love me. They listen to me. They support me. And I support them. You know, like it's really reciprocal. So I think the more we talk about suicide, the more comfortable we're going to get over the years. Same with, you know, like addiction and mental health. You know, we don't talk about schizophrenia a lot. We don't talk about bipolar. We don't talk about mood disorders a lot. We talk about depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress. That's what society is comfortable talking about. And you know, like we think about an eating disorder. An eating disorder is the most fatal mental illness that there is, and we don't talk about it, you know, because society says if we talk about it, then there's going to be more girls or more people that struggle with an eating disorder, and it's just not the case. There's been, you know, lots of studies proven that if we talk about it, it doesn't make that more contagious. So when it comes to suicide, I think people like us, you know, that we can really be the disruptors, and we can talk about suicide, and we can allow people to talk about suicide with us in a safe spot.
Okay, you already know how much I love that word disruptor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's you know, shaking the pot and changing the status quo. And it's those conversations. The statistics are, I don't know the numbers off it, but I know that the statistics are that most people that complete suicide have had previous attempts before. So it's something where they've been in that space, they've recognized it, and then, but we think from that means that if we talk about it, we're going to encourage it. And the opposite is true. The more we talk about it, the more likely it is we're going to see more Paulie O'Byrnes. You know, it's been 10 years since I've been in that space, right?
Yeah, I think that's part of the education, the prevention, the awareness. You know, we need more than one day a year that we talk about it. You know, we need more than World Suicide Prevention Day, September 10th. We need more than that day because awareness, again, is not contagious. You know, to talk about this stuff and to bring it to high schools, to bring it to real estate agents and hairdressers. You know, I think that the more people we arm with this prevention and these skill trainings, the more people that are able to help in the right now. And that's really what intervention is. It's just about in the right now. It's not about next week or 2 weeks or in a month. It's about let's get this person safe for right now. Mm-hmm. And so I think that anyone can do that. I think that if you're comfortable talking about it, then you can do it. You know, if you're comfortable saying the word suicide, then you can ask someone, are you thinking about suicide? And that's all it is. That's all you got to ask someone. As soon as you ask that question, you've, you know, let that person be in a safe spot to talk about suicide. And yeah, anyone can do it.
So I think there's a perception of if I'm having suicidal thoughts, therefore I'm weak or I'm not strong enough or there's something wrong with me. There's a taboo that says that, you know, there's something inherently wrong with me, probably, you know, a deep shame. We won't go into that, but there's something there in that process. So how do we go about encouraging people who are struggling with that taboo or breakout to have those conversations, do you think?
Well, I think talking about it, it's not a vulnerability, or it is a vulnerability, and it's actually a strength, you know, like it's not a weakness to talk about. That's the biggest thing in my life was I stayed silent about my sexual abuse, about the things I was struggling with as a kid and a teen. I kept quiet about that, and it kept me very sick for very long. And I think looking back with hindsight, perhaps I might not have stayed sick for so long if I would have talked about it. Just maybe, I don't know. And I think the more we talk about it, the less harm we're doing, you know, like the actual less harm we're doing, because we're letting it be a topic that we don't, you know, hold our hand over our mouth, or we don't say it in front of some certain people because we don't want to trigger them, right? And I'm not a big fan of the word trigger. I think like activate's a pretty good word. That triggers just, you know, it's, you know, has too much of a negative context kind of attachment to it. I think that we can really, you know, make some moves by having people trained in this and getting through their own personal stuff. Will inevitably make them in 10 years maybe come on Dean Anderson's show and say, 10 years ago I had a suicide attempt and now I help people. You know, that's the ultimate goal in all of this. So that's what I hope. I'll be tuning in for the next 10 years.
Yeah, no. There's, you know, some people might be wondering, you know, why are we talking about addiction? And there's some, you know, statistics that, you know, I'm going to share really quick. You know, it's notable that of men between the ages of 20 and 45, 1 in 5 of those deaths that happen in that are suicide. And 80 to 90% of suicides are substance abuse related. We're coming to an end here, and I could talk to you about this for hours, and we probably will at another time. But I want to ask you one last really quick question. If you can give some advice to somebody right now, and there's a camera over here, you're welcome to look at the camera here. You're going to give somebody advice who's struggling right now with suicidal ideations and suicidal thoughts. What do you got to say to them?
I just would say, like, hang on. You don't have to do this alone. There's help, there's hope. You can reach out to anyone in the City of London at any time, and we can get through this together. Just whatever you're feeling, it's not permanent, and it's definitely temporary. And don't ever feel like it's a weakness, because it's the biggest strength in speaking out.
You rock, my man.
Thanks, man.
And that is it for this episode of Invisible, and I thank Paulie O'Byrne for being on the show again, and we'll see you next time on Invisible, Breaking Through the Stigma of Addiction. Thanks for watching.